Insurance is not something that people wake up to and want to go and buy online. It's not one of those products which you naturally always search for.
Are there markets where you see it's actually more online?
If you look in markets like the UK, certain policies and P&C are very much bought like a supermarket approach.
Why do you think is there not more modernization?
It's a massive sort of gamble to take. They come up against unknown complexities which you could never know until you go through the journey. The industry is not going to change its mindset of wanting to go and do large-scale policy admin transformations, but it is becoming much more active about how can we externalize different capabilities. What's happening in the whole generative AI, LLM space is fascinating.
If you have a heavy core platform that is monolithic, it's probably a bit more difficult to innovate and bring GenAI in. But if it's cloud native and more flexible, then obviously you can make that change.
The GenAI and LLMs resolve a lot of service automation capabilities. The companies and the consultancies which actually embrace that capability are the ones which are going to be able to unlock a lot of different ways of how they make faster decisions, smarter insights.
Welcome to the Pulse Check podcast. John Brisco, it's been a long time. How are you?
I'm fantastic, Salomon. Great to see you today. I've just jetted in from Toronto this morning, so I'm trying to appear quite alive and energetic. So hopefully the chat today will be very good for both of us.
I will try to be easy and calm given that you just landed. So yeah, fantastic. We've been working together, I think, almost the past 10 years. You were our client before, but then also as partners, of course. And we come back to the company you were running, Coherent, very shortly as the CEO and co-founder, of course. But you also had a long career before that with many big insurers. But before we go into that topic, as you probably know, the icebreaker, what makes you, John?
What makes me is the fact I think I'm Scottish, right? And that's sometimes a good thing and sometimes a bad thing. I think I grew up in a town which is a very small town, only 10,000 people, where everyone knew everyone. But even from an early age, I felt that Scotland, even though it was very close to my heart, I probably had an aspiration to go beyond and explore the world. So my career has really enabled me to basically be adventurous, try different sort of challenges, try different sort of cultures, which morphed from moving internationally in a corporate career to then creating my own business, and a business which is unsurprisingly also became international because of probably that international domain. So still a true love for Scotland, but maybe because it was so small, it made me have an aspiration to explore this big world, and hence why I do certainly love having an international sort of jet-setting life. But in reality, it's because I just see such an opportunity across the world.
Yeah, I've been traveling through Scotland quite a bit and been working there, especially Edinburgh, as well as Glasgow. And every time I went to Glasgow, I had the struggles because I could almost not understand the people there anymore. And they always ask me, of course, the first question, is it Celtic or is it Glasgow Rangers? No, great to have you on board for this podcast. So let's quickly go back to your career before we go into the main questions. I mean, you've started off working for some of the biggest insurers in the market. And then at some point you decided to go startup entrepreneur. Maybe you can quickly tell me what brought you to leaving the big corporate entrepreneurial.
Look, I had a fantastic career in corporate. Obviously, as mentioned a bit earlier, international experience, started in Europe with the AXA Group, which is a fantastic company to start with, just given the sheer size and scale. And then that took me to Australia with them as well. So basically, I had a great time working in the life space within AXA Australia before moving to consulting for a period of time, and then back into industry with QBE Insurance, and obviously QBE, another international company. So had a fantastic opportunity as part of their transformation to help essentially a number of technology as well as digitization initiatives to help the company take advantage of obviously its global scale. Before that took me from Australia to Hong Kong. where I then worked for QB before moving to Manulife. And that was, again, a new challenge. Manulife being such a huge organization, loved every minute there. But then it was quite interesting, even though I was really enjoying my role, really enjoying the company, something kept on at the back of my head going about an idea around how could I actually help the insurance industry more broader with some of the knowledge as well as some of the ideas I had on software capability, which led me to create Coherent around about 7 or 8 years ago. And ever since then, it's been building a business from the say zero to obviously now a business which has got presence across the globe. And it's been an incredible sort of journey. There's been massive ups, there's been massive downs, there's been lefts, there's been rights. But it's been that experience probably of the insurance and financial services sector, working in the sector, which helped me identify where an opportunity could be. And I'm really pleased to be working with some of the largest insurers, the largest banks in the world now as part of that journey. So leveraging that experience in a slightly different way, and obviously being now an entrepreneur or running a smaller company is very different to being in a bigger company. But I still retain a lot of relationships and network through the journey that got me there. And I look forward to continuing that ongoing.
And the experience you always is highly energetic. And that works very well, of course, in a startup environment. Sometimes in big corporates, you are stuck in processes and governance. And that may also lead to difficulties in innovate. Maybe the first question in that regard is, why do large insurers not digitize more? And maybe just a quick sidetrack on also my experience when I came to Hong Kong more than 10 years ago is that I was expecting, okay, I go online, I can quickly check different health insurance with the different benefits and compare and select and do it all online. And was then immediately reminded, no, you need to talk to either brokers or different agents. So why do you think is there not more digital?
Yeah, I think there could be 100 ways to answer this question. By my own personal perspective, when really kind of thinking through the whole world of what is digitization in insurance, right? And if you look at the journey of many insurers, it's not as if they haven't embraced technology and they haven't thought about new innovation in order to help their customer or their distribution base. But in reality, for the years of building insurance business, whether it's in life, whether it's in P&C, whether it's in group, frankly, they are partnership businesses, whether that's partnerships with the agency force they create, the broker force that they do have multi-distribution with, or even now in the world of embedded insurance, thinking about how they penetrate and work with new digital business models. That's where they're much more comfortable in terms of thinking about how they actually grow their business. Because ultimately they started as really sort of product engineering organizations who would basically develop really sophisticated products covering a lot of large risks, a lot of large complexity. But because of that, they needed that partnership network to take it to clients to explain what that product was. So thus, I think there's always a misconception around what digitization is meant to mean for insurance. For many people, it's about, well, shouldn't it be the digitization focus on the end customer, the policyholder? 100% insurers do try to simplify that journey, but in many ways, they realize the way to get to the customer is actually through that partnership network, right? And ultimately, I think that's where a lot of the focus has gone to try to effectively improve what happens in that world to make it easier for the partnership network, to make it easier for the customers. So you as an end customer may not see as much as you want to see, frankly, right? But in all realism, what the insurers have realized is that has been the way of how they've been able to distribute the product, which, as mentioned, tends to be relatively complex. And then it's that complexity which then drives higher margins and higher sort of profitability. And thus having that sort of partner sort of growth game plan is the way they've scaled their businesses. So I don't think you're going to see a morph to them becoming much more digital direct. I think many of them have tried, both in life and P&C. There's very few successes. I think if you even look at some of the big funded sort of, dare I say, digital insurance companies who have tried to go direct to consumer, very difficult. It's proven that insurance is not something that people wake up to and want to go and buy online. It's not one of those products which you naturally always search for. So to me, the whole digitization opportunity is certainly around that way of how you digitize that network that you've built of partnerships and distribution. And then obviously, I think more around how you become faster and smarter by getting that product complexity to that partnership network.
Do you see any differences in different geographies in how much is really agency partnership driven? Are there markets where you see it's actually more online? Other markets where it's more bank assurance through their partnerships?
Yeah. I think it goes down to the complexity of what you're trying to sell. So the reality, whether it's P&C, whether it's life insurance, it's an 80-20 rule. The reality is that basically 20% of the customer base makes 80% of the profitability. And therefore, unsurprisingly, that tends to be where it's the distribution types of partnerships, brokers, agency, separate your own advisor force. That tends to be where effectively a large side of the monetization comes. And you can go globally. That is tending to be the model, right? And I think what's different in certain markets is the rise of embedded insurance and the rise of, dare I say, more aggregation type capability. If you look in markets like the UK, certain policies in P&C are very much bought like a supermarket approach, like effectively car and travel insurance. But any sort of specialized product is still via brokers and agents, right? And I do see obviously quite a lot of excitement and traction that has started to happen in the whole embedded space. I think the likes of Chubb and Chubb Studio, Zurich Edge, and a few other insurers are really showing some massive momentum in that space. But they're obviously much more simpler products, much more high frequency products, which don't tend to have the same margin as maybe some other types of products, which really bring in a lot of the revenue and monetization for the larger insurers. So I think you're going to see that trend globally continuing. But it is exciting that the embedded insurance trail has started to get a lot of traction, and something which I think will continue over the course of the next several years.
Coming to life insurance, maybe specifically, where you say, of course, higher complexity, especially if it's for ultra high net worth individuals. And Hong Kong is a big market for life insurance, of course. And I think that's where we also collaborate and have a joint proposition in terms of the agents enablement, as of course you're right, the agent also needs to explain the complex product. And there is complexity in terms of course, the investment aspect of it. I always say life insurance is almost like a wrapped investment product. And then, of course, also in terms of the actual underlying risk management insurance aspects, where also your solution comes in. So talking again about the full end-to-end digitization, not maybe towards the end client, but from the agent all the way down, of course, also to the insurer. There is challenges, and especially also when it comes to core insurance transformation. And you've, again, worked for big insurers before, many of which still run on old legacy applications, AS400 systems. Why do you think is there not more modernization?
So I think the question of legacy modernization is one is that everyone's lips in the life insurance space and arguably the group insurance space. Let's first of all start. The P&C industry has been much more aggressive at changing its core systems, right? The rise of companies like Guidewire, Duck Creek, etc., who have got hundreds of installations across P&C insurers across the globe, is a rise that you can change core systems. But why has that been the case? Mainly due to the fact that a lot of the policies are obviously single-year policies. And therefore, when you're thinking about things such as a migration or a transition, compare that to a life insurance system, which is sometimes catering for 30, 40, 50-year products and policyholder data. The reality is the life cycle of that system and those products, people have long gone from the organization. So put yourself in the shoes of a life insurance executive or executives, thinking about the migration complexity of taking that legacy platform where there's so much corporate DNA, which some of it being known, some of it being unknown, and then the risk to try and move it to a platform which potentially may not be fully proven in a region or a market. it's a massive sort of gamble to take. And for many insurers, that's why they've maybe started thinking about how do we tackle the elephant with different, taking a bite out of the elephant versus essentially trying to go through and tackle the whole elephant. So more ways of how can you externalize things away from COBOL backends or Oracle backends, depending what the system is, versus trying to do an end-to-end sort of migration or an end-to-end sort of retirement of a system. So the reality is you could probably speak to every insurer globally. They've got the same challenge. Some have tried, most have failed. And in many instances, you can understand why, right? Just they come up against unknown complexities, which you could never know until you go through the journey. So I feel that therefore the industry is not going to change its mindset of wanting to go and do large scale policy admin transformations, but it is becoming much more active about how can we externalize different capabilities from those backends. And then that's why there's so much investment on the distribution space as well as the product innovation space, because knowing what you know that you can't change the back end and divest the money into areas which are going to enable your distribution to be more effective and your products to be more innovative to your customer set. And then obviously trying to make certain things in the customer experience more seamless, but you've got to get the balance right because obviously the distributor works with the customer and they want to work with the customer in a certain way. So therefore, you've got to adapt to what that distribution mindset is. You can't just tell the customer you can do X, Y, Z because the distributor sometimes might want to control that experience themselves. So not easy to transform in the life insurance space. Not easy to change the P&C space, but certainly I think there's a lot of hurdles which have caused some of the challenges which many life insurers have, but it's also meant why they focus on certain areas of the value chain versus focusing on maybe some others which they know are very, very complex.
Makes totally sense. So let's switch gears a bit and talk then about the life of an entrepreneur of an insurtech company.
Very stressful.
Very stressful for sure. Again, you just landed here this morning. No, I mean, of course, you identified that problem before when you were working also in-house and you saw, okay, there's an opportunity to create a solution that basically wraps on legacy. And I think you've had amazing success the past 7-8 years. But for sure, you also had challenges. Maybe you can elaborate a bit on some of the challenges of a insurtech company.
Yeah, I think like the challenges are endless, right? Where the reality is when you're a small business that's seeking to go from one level to the next, to the next, to the next. Every time you go to that next level, there's a new different sort of mountain to climb. Well, maybe I'll call it a hill to climb versus a mountain, because it starts to expose where your strengths are, starts to expose where your sort of weaknesses are. And then you have to basically kind of adapt very, very quickly in order to get to that next level. So for us as a business, some of the sort of major challenges we faced, obviously the path to become global as a business. We started the business in the Asia region. I was obviously an executive here, created the business out of Hong Kong, but realized we felt we had a product which could become sort of applicable to any sort of institution globally. Therefore, you have to start thinking about how you're going to distribute essentially globally. And obviously during the initial COVID times, I don't like speaking about COVID anymore, but trying to build an international business during COVID, you were basically trying to trust people in different geographies without ever meeting them face to face. And for many instances, you get some hires right, you get some hires not so right, but that's part of the gamble that you have to do in order to kind of get to that next frontier. So internationalization is really sort of a major sort of barrier for a lot of companies in order to reach their potential. One that I think we've done extremely well of being able to pivot our business to North America in particular, but you still are learning every day as you go through that sort of journey. The other major aspect as well is, which we faced, is the realization as you tackle more industries, even though it's the same platform, how you speak about the platform has to be tailored to different industries.
Yeah.
So how I would speak about it to a P&C executive or P&C technical team is very different to how I would speak about it to life and retirement and to banking and capital markets. And that takes a bit of time. Like often when you start thinking you're a multi-industry business, you try to become very standardized of how you pitch a product or how you pitch your story. But you start realizing actually there has to be that sort of adaptation as well as that sort of synchronization with the industry that you're talking to for them to fully understand your platform in their eyes and their language. And that's something which we had to learn very, very fast. Particularly as we've started to scale over the last year and a half to all three different industries. Our teams have had to adapt their storytelling as well as even demonstrations that they do, or even how they speak to different types of executives to make it relevant for them. So yeah, that business sort of DNA sort of adjustment is very sort of important. And then the third area, which I could probably speak about 100 challenges, Salomon, but the third challenge, which is always at the top of your mind, is the desperation to kind of continually innovate. So during my time, there's been the rise of numerous types of different technologies that have came in the world. Some have been fads, while some I think are here to stay, right? And then you've got to make a conscious decision as a business founder, as well as obviously someone who's tasked with thinking about the long-term growth of your company. What will be the fads, i.e. the metaverse, versus what will be real, i.e. generative AI. And therefore, once you become convinced something's going to be real, you've got to make sure that your product and your story and your business is going to make sure it fits into something which is going to maybe shape business for years to come. So often people get caught in hype. You have to be kind of very sort of focused around what you believe will actually sort of become into business practice. And often they can distract you by going after too many things. And don't get me wrong, we've gone after some things which I look back and go, we probably should have done that. But there's certain choices I think we have made which now will bear a lot of the fruits of their labour by making that sort of belief decision that this will be something which will be fundamentally important for us as a business.
Yeah, fail fast and learn.
Yeah.
I will come back to GenAI, of course.
Yeah, I'm sure we
will,
yes.
what I was talking about. Exactly. But before that, one thing that I'm very curious about is, I mean, of course, the US is known for also innovation and especially big tech companies. You mentioned those before, Duck Creek and Guidewire and other companies that have gone global. And I wonder, how is it for you, being Scottish, coming from Hong Kong, going into the US and drive innovation? I mean, how is it perceived there? Do they see really, okay, Asia, Europe, they're also bringing innovation? Or is there a bit of resistance because they feel, hey, why do we not have insurtechs coming really from the US instead?
I think it's a really interesting question. I think if I look back at the journey of the business, when we first entered the US, we were very fortunate that it was actually a few significant tier one insurers who trusted us to come into the market. And I can name them, Transamerica and Prudential Financial were fantastic first North America clients to have. Because the reality being, once you could go speak to other clients and go, well, those two institutions believe in what we can do, it did lessen the sort of, did I say, distrust or uneasiness that people may have around an Asia company potentially entering North America, right? So that was, every business needs a bit of luck. That was obviously something which I think was very fortunate for us. But then you start realizing if you're going to be really serious about North America, we had to change our focus and DNA around essentially, well, how do we actually look and feel about being a legitimate North America presence? So we had to bring in depth sort of team, in-depth sort of marketing to the market. We had to get more awareness in the market. But I think a lot of clients do like the fact that we still bring innovation from the Asia market. But what we probably put is a wrap around how it applies to the US market. There's some incredible things that happen in this region. I do think it's ahead of the game on things like product externalization, and I think it's also in a number of distribution innovation. It really is ahead of the game. But then how to bring that into the North American market in a way that they can translate and understand that is, I think, part of the art which we're trying to do. So I don't think there's any North America company that's not interested in innovation happening in this part of the world or any part of the world. What they ask from them is, adapt it to the regulations, adapt it to the ways of how we do business. And then we're very interested to basically how we can utilize that capability. So that's been a big learning for us. I think it's been a learning that's been quite successful. But ultimately, I think America has its nuances as well. What's 50 states, every state has different regulations, right? Which people forget, right? So you try and do a policy in one region or one state, you have to basically have a new policy in a completely different state. You have to rate the product differently, etc. So the complexities they are, right, to overcome, they've got a lot of complexity to deal with as well. That's why they say, think about your solution and how can it help us streamline some of those challenges? Because that's the challenges they're facing every day.
I'm happy to hear that actually really there is innovation coming from any part in the world and people are receptive as long as you can show, of course, with a first anchor client that it works out well. I think also coming from Asia makes a bit more flexible in a sense as the diversity in Asia itself, Southeast Asia, with so many different countries and jurisdictions and languages, you have to be very flexible already. And that probably makes it then also easier. Of course, as we said before, one topic, GenAI, is of course one we need to touch on, especially also because I think it helps you with also your solution. While if you have a heavy core platform that is monolithic, it's probably a bit more difficult to innovate and bring GenAI in. But if it's cloud native and more flexible, then obviously you can make that change. So maybe you can start first with your experience and how you deal with it in your company, but then also broader how you think the insurtech industry will change due to also the implications.
Yeah. Like I think the what's happening in the whole generative AI LLM space is fascinating, right? And I would argue also the last 6 months in particular, the rise in sort of model quality and model scale means that I actually do think for the first time there's genuine enterprise applicability. I would argue actually up until that point, I've been very nervous if I was an enterprise using generative AI for anything apart from just basic knowledge queries, because there was still too much, whether it's hallucination or too much errors happening in regards to you couldn't really trust everything that the models were saying. But now there's been an incredible sort of momentum shift in the quality and scale of those models. So that I think has given people a lot more confidence. I think you're going to see initially a lot of focus on how basically GenAI and LMs resolve a lot of service automation capabilities. It's unsurprising. You can imagine how powerful it can be in things like service centers, right? I'll give you a classic example. I feel sorry for a lot of call center operators and large insurance organizations where a customer calls in, and if there's any sort of question of reasonable complexity, you can imagine a call center operator is having to go to multiple systems to try to basically reconcile how to answer that question. Common problem across the world. Doesn't matter which region you are. There'll be probably a lot of people laughing as I say this going, I know exactly what you're talking about, John. But you can imagine if somebody can start essentially consolidating policy and product information as well as various information from other data feeds and start inputting that into their own LLM or their own sort of effectively GenAI solution internally, all of a sudden it's query-based and it's prompt-based where you as a call center operator can now have a lot more intelligent and faster answers back to your customers, which are actually accurate and actually essentially enable you to resolve the query versus saying, we'll call you back in a week or we'll write you a letter with basically what our viewpoint is, which particularly in life and group insurance is still a big part of the challenge when people are trying to get any sort of answer to kind of complex queries. So I think I don't like using the word revolution. I just think there'll be a massive evolution in the ability to service customers. Then I think it will spread to how a lot of financial and business and process analysis gets done within organizations. I feel that there is so much that gets done today, a lot of it manually, a lot of it taking data information from various different sources in order to basically enable workloads to be done. And yes, there's been things such as process mining tools or data mining tools, but they are actually nothing compared to what the generative AI capabilities combined with newer technologies like some of the technology we have or other firms have. You can start thinking about incredible ways of how to not only identify where your efficiencies are, but essentially immediately sort of remediate those inefficiencies. And I think the companies and the consultancies which actually embrace that capability are the ones which are going to be able to unlock a lot of different ways of how they make faster decisions, how they unlock smarter insights in regards to financial and business sort of logic, but also enable teams to be working on much more higher sort of problems versus a lot of mundane problems just because of the way how things get done on a daily basis. So I feel that'll be a big battleground. And then the third battleground is essentially, does it ever move to actually starting to provide ideation around how you should design new products and ideas for your business?
Mm-hmm.
And you can imagine in the future, it may do that. The only challenge LLMs have at the moment, though, can consume many sort of readable documentation, can't handle calculation logic, which is complex.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, I think our technology can help with that journey, but I feel that if you as an organization really think differently about how do you essentially source data into LLMs, how do you also piece together the right technology to basically be talking to the LLMs, then you could be getting some incredible product ideas that are emerging, which you may not have thought about before. And just even the ability to scan the whole world's products catalogs, you could basically start doing that as well, right? So I feel that will be a future frontier. Maybe not here right now, but that'll be an area where I think a lot of insurers are both in the life side and the P&C side will start leveraging the technology for different ideas of how to basically build new experiences and new product offerings for customers.
Yeah, that's probably also a bit of where the old classical predictive AI comes in combination of Gen AI. We see that also in banking on, of course, market stress testing simulation. That's not where you use Gen AI, but predictive AI, Monte Carlo simulation, and so on. Exactly. And if you can then combine more innovative ideation with, of course, more the accurate descriptive calculation, then, of course, it could become very powerful. Linking it also back maybe to the question we had at the beginning in terms of also client engagement, client relationship management through agencies. How do you see these capabilities? Of course, the back office is very clear in terms of efficiency, but how do you see it in terms of how then these agents are equipped, maybe using Gen AI to engage with the clients?
Well, and again, obviously, I think it's a huge sort of opportunity for the insurance industry. I don't think anyone will get too emotional or discount me too much when I say there's probably two classes of distribution, agency and brokerages, right? You have the more higher professional agents who are thoroughly trained, essentially fully qualified to sell a lot of large, complex products, whether that's in P&C or in life. And thus, the use of LLMs to them is to help them analyze information faster in order to advise their customers better. And for example, trying to basically, the client's got all these different complexities. Essentially, what are some of the policy considerations which maybe should be thought about in terms of the bespoke proposal which is going to come round? And I could see that being quite a major area which a lot of those more higher value type advisors or brokers are going to latch on to as part of their sort of value offering to clients. And clients will actually expect that moving forward as well. But then I think if you look in particularly the Asia region, obviously huge agency forces, many of them are part-time, many of them aren't fully as trained as the high-valued advisors. Yes, they go and get training camps, and yes, they get kind of effectively some form of product and customer training. But the reality is there is obviously significant sort of ins and outs of that agency force. So just given the nature of this, particularly Southeast Asia, but also China as well, and India, the way of how those economies have worked. So the usage of GenAI to help those agents become faster, knowledgeable, smarter, and more engaged to stay in the industry is a massive upside opportunity, right? Because the insurers would bite your hand off if they could retain more of those customers and make more of those agents and make them more productive. Because ultimately, just make their model more scalable and much more obviously profitable moving forward as well. So every single one of them will be thinking about how to utilize that capability. And the key is, how do you do it in a way which basically engages that agency kind of capability to basically continue to learn? It's not just a one-off. How do you get them to come back? I think anyone thinking through that sort of training paradigm using GenAI in order to enhance the maturity of those agency forces, I think is going to do it quite well.
Absolutely. And probably then even helps when the agent needs to also explain a complex product to the client.
So it's not just, it's also the reality being, how do you make them, both the agent, able to explain it in a layman terms to the customer, right? So you can imagine, customer, I don't really understand this. Can you help? You type into the prompt, explain in a layman and bullet point term exactly what the customer is looking for. And obviously, I feel that that's going to be the world which is going to be able to be at people's fingertips sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. And in a coffee space with an iPad or phone, and not in a complex...
and I think that everyone knows is that, particularly in the life insurance space, where obviously there's a huge agency forces, you generally have that 1 hour window to basically get the client hooked on wanting to either know more or basically wanting to acquire the product. So the quicker that you can get them understanding why that product meets their needs, answers their questions, makes them comfortable, helps them understand different scenarios and different implications for different family members, your chances of then closing that out are going to be much higher.
Very interesting. I would love to continue, of course, but as we're almost on time, let me quickly summarize some of the key points we discussed, starting with, of course, really the, call it legacy, old world of insurance, with the insurance partnerships and some of the challenges on why can we not see maybe more digitization in the full end-to-end process. But of course, also that's insurance in nature, especially when it comes to life, that the distribution network, including insurers, brokers, they're essential and they will not be replaced. To then, of course, life of an entrepreneur, insurtech, how challenging it was for you, but in general, to also then forward-looking the GenAI capabilities that hopefully make not only your solution stronger and better, but really the life of an agent, and of course also the end client who buys an insurance product better, that it's more understandable, more also tailored towards the client needs. So really fascinating to go through this in just a half an hour conversation, and I'm sure we can in the next conversation deep even further into the topics. Before we close, where can we find you, John? And anything else you want to highlight or explain?
Yeah, no problem. I'm easily findable on LinkedIn, John Brisco, for those who don't know me. Our website is coherent.global, and basically that gives a much more rundown into the platform and the various sort of clients as well as solutions that we bring to market globally. And we generally appear now also on channels such as YouTube, where we have our own YouTube channel, which gives more sort of demos around what our product does and the value it brings as well. So multiple ways of how you can get access to myself and the company. And we're always delighted to help people understand what we do and the problems we solve.
Excellent. And yeah, people will also see you on stage in the US or in Hong Kong or across the world. Thank you so much for coming over. It was a pleasure. The pulse check of Synpulse 8, we find us, of course, also online, and we collaborate. So there will be also demos where you see both sides of the solution. So great to work and collaborate with you. And thanks for being here today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.